Okay, good day to everyone. My name is Brandon James Sim. I'm going to be interviewing Chris Noble of Ancient Mysteries Unearthed. Yes, I'm a big fan of Chris's work, and through collaboration, we've reached out and realized we're going to do a little bit of interviewing the content creator series here, and I'm super excited to be talking to Chris because Chris, you have been uncovering and digging into some things that are becoming more popular, I'd say, with the access of the internet, but certainly not anything new to society. We've kind of been knowing that there's some question marks out there for some time, but archaeology with new advancements like LiDAR and deep penetrating radar, and just the vast amount of us and being connected, these things are starting to come to life. Do you maybe want to tell us what's going on with you? Why did you start to look into this? What part of Chris Noble saw the world and thought, you know what, something doesn't add up here?
Thanks, Brandon. Appreciate it. And this is so much fun. I'm really looking forward to diving into this today because this is stuff that I've been obsessed with for a long time, but I used to not be. You know, as a kid, I found history really boring. Personally, I was not at all engaged in history class. I thought it was pretty dry. So all of a sudden, why am I so interested in history? Well, I'm interested in the lost history. I'm interested in the history that we didn't get taught in school. And for many different reasons, we didn't get taught this in school. We can go into that later. But for me, you know, I didn't think much of our past until my early 20s when I started to watch different documentaries. And like you mentioned, with the beautiful invention of the internet, all of a sudden, this sharing of ideas from alternative sources, from independent researchers and maybe scientists that have been ridiculed in their own field for trying to rewrite the paradigm, but of course, still publish their amazing findings. And you can access this and read about this and watch these things. And so for me, I think because I'm a filmmaker, I really resonated with certain documentary films like The Pyramid Code, for example, is one of the first ones I watched. Now that's available on YouTube. I believe it used to be on Netflix. So for those of you listening, definitely check out The Pyramid Code by the late Egyptologist, Dr. Carmen Bolter from the University of Calgary. She put all this together in I think a 6-part series that doesn't go even that deep into all the crazy mysteries surrounding just ancient Egypt, but it asks the questions. And for me, it was the questions that I had never asked. And for example, like things of like, what was the Great Pyramid really built for? And did you know that it wasn't a tomb? Conclusively, we know that because there's never been a mummy found inside of that. And that's one of the main things. I wasn't a big history nerd, but I remember, you know, the ancient Egyptians and all the basic general things you get taught about them. And you're like, okay, they build pyramids and then the pharaohs get buried in them. Great. That's cool. And then you start to learn, wait a minute, no pharaoh was buried in the Great Pyramid. No sarcophagus was found in the Great Pyramid. And, you know, you look at the structure, you look at the details, and then in the documentary, The Pyramid Code, they break down the construction method of this pyramid. And you just start to go, well, what in the hell was this thing built for? How was it built? And who on earth built it? Because none of those questions are answered. And so for me, it was just these questions of, wait a minute, we actually don't know who built a lot of these ancient structures. Okay, so who did? Well, we don't know. Why did they build them? We don't know. So I started to realize that there were so many more mysteries, so many more uncertainties and untold truths and stories about our ancient past that we have no idea about. And to be honest, the questions are really interesting. And some of the, at least theories and the evidence that we do have are so mind-shattering and so incredible that it became far more interesting than the old history that I was taught in school. And it just ignited my passion, ignited my curiosity more than anything. And, you know, once you go down that rabbit hole, like all of those of you listening, and I know, Brandon, you can relate to this, once you get on a topic that is interesting, and then you see more evidence, new discoveries, new theories all the time coming out more and more and more. It one only increases that curiosity and that voracious need to explore that rabbit hole. But then two is it gives you more of a feeling of confidence behind the fact that, hold on, these mysteries have way more weight than we think. These aren't just crazy conspiracy theories or, outlandish pseudoscience theories. These have a ton of solid evidence when you dig into them. And that's what's really compelling for me, is a lot of these things have even more credence and more evidence to support them than some of the mainstream theories do. So for me, it started with documentaries like The Pyramid Code, and then it just kind of snowballed from there into YouTube rabbit holes, readings from online. And then eventually I took it into my own hands to go to these places in real life. And I went to South Africa in 2017 with Michael Tellinger, who's a fantastic independent researcher down there, looking at the ancient stone circle ruins of South Africa, very mysterious, millions of them, stones that ring like bells, resonating stones built in cymatic patterns.
But those are just cow structures, right? To keep cattle.
Yeah, well, according to the mainstream perspective, yeah, that's what you're taught in school, is it's for cattle, even though there's no entrance ways or exits into the structures. So how did the cows leap over these big walls? Well, of course they didn't. So it's theories like that, right, that we start to go, oh, interesting. So there's one version, one theory that's taught to us in school, but there's so many other theories that have equal amounts, if not more evidence to support them. And we're not hearing about those theories. So for me, I wanted to go to places like that, Egypt in 2019 as well, and see it for myself, but also ask those questions and show the world through, a YouTube channel and research organization like Ancient Mysteries Unearthed, that there are other sides to the story. I just want to bring all the sides together and allow the reader or the listener or the watcher to decide for themselves what they think the story is.
Well, Chris, I will say, as far as being a fan and listener and watcher of your content, and a fan of your work in real life, I would say thank you for exploring this and having the bravery to go down this road. Because I will tell you, my journey started. I was a minor in history in university. I always loved the story of history. I thought it was so compelling, and I actually took a course called the Practicing Historian. And this was about how to be a proper historian. What are we really breaking down? And the primary sources and the true evidence, the undisputable stuff, because history is often an opinion piece, it sounds like. So this is what they're trying to, right. It's a story. It's an interpretation of facts, right? Obviously, we know that some people interpret things however they want. We see that with politics all the time, right? So in this course, the very first class, they were talking about primary documents. Having to, if you're going to make a statement, you have to have primary documents, hard evidence to back it up. And he mentioned the pyramids, and he said they were built by Jewish slaves. As to which I remember asking him, like, well, what evidence do you have to support that? And he didn't really have any. It is a theory that humans built the pyramids, right? And he was like, well, it's accepted fact. And I was like, but what are you basing that off of? And I had no conception of what we're about to discuss today. This is my the seedling getting germinated as far as this is concerned. I actually got kicked out of the class because I was asking him, I'm like, well, you're just exactly what you told us this whole class is about now. Now you're saying that I'm just to accept that that people were enslaved and built these pyramids, and that's a theory. It's a great theory. It might be true, or there might be elements of truth to that. However, it wasn't satisfying to me, and I got kicked out of the class. So as soon as that happened, I started going down these rabbit holes and looking for content creators like you to bring things to life. So I get that. And I'm going to use this as a segue here for the mainstream, because that was my experience with the mainstream. And it seems to be that view from my professor in university is kind of an accepted view. And it's almost much like I see ancient pyramids popping up all around the world, almost like there's a shared culture. There seems to be a shared culture of this suppression of what is there, because there are these cyclopean, huge, massive structures all around the world that capture my imagination. And as much as the human race is an amazing race, and I do see the good in society, I do see that we're all connected, we're all truly a family on this planet. I don't know if we were capable of doing that then, or if we were, we've definitely lost something. The stories of Atlantis or Mu, this high society from the past, it might just be a different society than we have now. So, what are your experiences, I guess, with the mainstream, and where do you see it? I know they're probably not directly attacking you right now, but they're attacking the theories and the thoughts that you're having. And we're seeing it with people who are having more success in this field. Certainly some of your mentors, and how they're getting kind of belittled by the mainstream. Do you know why that is? Is it the industrial educational complex? Where is this fragility that suppresses our question of why and our sense of wonder? Where is that coming from?
That's such a good question, Brandon. And that's like 8 podcasts of 8 hours in length each you could have on this one topic. I mean, it's a big one. And so to really kind of gloss over this for today, I would say there's a lot of reasons. I would say on a more surface level, on a less deep and philosophical and slightly conspiratorial level, that it comes down to ego. And in academia, science, anything in the academic world, I've witnessed firsthand, hanging out with many other professors and scientists on some of these trips, or just throughout my personal life. I have lots of friends in the field in different disciplines, and it is very interesting to see what happens when you have what's called as the main theory that everyone accepts in this time. And just so everyone remembers, science is always in a state of evolution and motion. Everything that we take as fact today could be complete fiction 100 or 200, 300 years from now, 10 years from now, because science is always changing. Let's not forget things like Galileo, right? He was absolutely ridiculed. And then well after his death, 100 years after his death, it took at least for people to start coming around to the fact that, wait, we do orbit the sun. You know, these are fundamental things that we now take for granted as fact. Just remember, when it was first proposed back in the day, it was met with not only ridicule, but violence. House arrest was generous. Most sometimes it would lead to death from these people, because it threatens a paradigm, a philosophy in a way of who we are as a species. But to go back to ego, what I see a lot of the time in academia and the scientific world is that whoever created that main theory, right? Let's say the theory of the fact that the pyramids were built by slaves, for example, or that they were used as tombs, to house mummies, right? Whoever put that theory out in the first place is recognized as the founder of that theory. All of the textbooks that are going to be distributed around the world teaching these subjects are going to have that person who founded the theory as the creditor, and who's making some back-end cash and some money on that. Their whole career, their academic reputation, their financial, their income is all based on this theory. So when somebody else or an organization of other people come around and disprove that theory, offering new theories, it upsets the ego of the academic, because not only are they being proven that they're wrong, but now the books that are sold in their name, all of the theories that are taught in their name are now wiped out, and they don't get that credit anymore. They don't get that validation, and they don't get the financial benefits of that either. So they have a lot to lose, and I can actually sympathize with that. It took me quite a few years to get around to understanding the side of the mainstream sometimes, because it would just frustrate me, the closed-mindedness I would witness a lot of the time. But now I can understand, that it is a lot of someone's entire livelihood in life that could be, in a sense, dismantled. But at the same time, if you're a true scientist and a true academic, that's the nature of the business. And I've met also other wonderful academics and scientists, archaeologists, et cetera, who are happy to have their theories proven wrong and be like, great, more evidence. Let's keep unfolding the story together. And I think that's the attitude that we need, is a collaboration, not a competition attitude. That's the ego side of it. Now, I'll really briefly touch on the other side. There's probably much more layers to this, but when you start to go down this rabbit hole of ancient history, you also start to discover that humans were very, very advanced in terms of their knowledge, but also in terms of their spiritual and almost what we could call paranormal or psychic abilities. What we would, categorize today as almost superhuman abilities. You can look back into the past, and there is so much knowledge about how to augment and improve the human being, this body, this vessel that our consciousness, our soul lives in. It is an advanced piece of machinery. This body can do absolutely amazing things. And the ancients definitely understood that. And they have a lot of practices and teachings, some more mysterious and hidden, some more public, that they were wanting to teach not only the people of the time, but of course leave and preserve in stone for future generations to be able to rediscover this lost almost technology of consciousness in a way. And I think the threat that the mainstream and the let's say, when I say mainstream, I mean this expands beyond academia into corporate interests, government interests, political interests. And if you have a society that's based off of a public that has to buy a lot of different things to satisfy a lot of parts of life and survival, whether it's shelter, energy, food, warmth, regulating your body temperature, sickness, health, all of these things we rely on external factions and external organizations, institutions to help us with. Well, once you go down these interesting rabbit holes of ancient history, you discover that there is so much power within the human vessel, within us, to be able to supply ourselves with everything we could possibly need. And then when we work in collaboration and community with one another, we can have all the other things we need: energy, shelter, food, all these things we can provide for ourselves in abundance with no problem and no need for external forces. And so therefore you lose these industries almost overnight when people start to discover that these were other ways that we could be living, and living with no looks of poverty or nothing. Like, we don't have to downgrade. This is actually an upgrade. And the ancients can teach us a lot of how we can upgrade ourselves individually and collectively as a society. And so I think that threatens the industries, right? That threatens the big pharmaceutical industries, the big agricultural industries, and so on and so forth. All the things that rely on a population that needs them. And the ancients can show us a lot of ways, including free energy. When you look into the Great Pyramid and many other examples like that, that Tesla was getting involved in.
Do you think Tesla was rediscovering ancient technology?
He based his entire Wardenclyffe Tower off of the Great Pyramid. So absolutely, and he's not the only one. Even Hitler and the Nazis were obsessing over going to different ancient sites around the world, looking for lost high technology. The US government, the military, they go to a lot of ancient sites.
Well, why are they in the Middle East all the time, right? I mean,
why do they set up weird bases outside of ancient sites? And when I was in Egypt, my Egyptologist, Mohammed Ibrahim, told me about different NASA scientists and military scientists that would go on his tours and ask him about really weird things, like the scarab beetle, for example. And they asked that they were wondering if the scarab was not only a symbol, but also an actual example of how a living form, like an insect, can create anti-gravity with its wings. And it's the vibrational frequency technology of the vibration of the scarab wings. They were wondering if that was actually a form of anti-gravity. And this is being asked of the Egyptologist that I was with, who was a very open-minded one, of course. And you got to wonder if these I'm not a pro-war or anything, but what I like and admire about a lot of different military is that if something works, they don't care. There's really no prejudice or judgment. If it's an ancient technology, who cares? We don't care if it's upsetting the mainstream paradigm. We want it. It gives us an advantage. We'll take it. And so I sometimes trust their research more because they don't have those prejudice of, oh, well, that's impossible because of this paradigm that we have currently dictates that could never have happened in history. They're like, anything's possible. Just give us the information and we'll see if it works for us or not. So, yeah, I think that's really interesting.
We see that drip exposure in our media, right? With things like the men who stare at goats. They're playing with psychic abilities, remote viewing. Remote viewing at this point, I mean, there's documents being declassified by the American government that are talking about remote viewing Mars. That might sound crazy talk to some of our listeners, or some of our listeners who are, listening by association, who are walking into the room right now. But there's something to this world, and it all comes with this ancient knowledge. And the ancient knowledge, I think, has so much to teach us. However, therein lies the problem, and therein lies the opportunity for people like you, where it's we have to discover and rediscover this. So it's about uncovering artifacts, because where are we going to get this knowledge? There might be a collective knowledge. You hear that that we can tap into, but we haven't done the groundwork for that as a society. And I think society, we the term woke gets thrown around, and there's debate on what that means. But to me, I see a society really of children. We are all children, as far as our spiritual game is concerned, most of us. And we consume on this internet, and we eat all this bad energy. Really, I mean, we're watching videos of people falling down, pulling pranks. We're not enlightening ourselves, but yet we're starting to wake up. We're getting restless. We want this enlightenment. That's where I think we're getting this social warrior attitude of like something's wrong, and we're maybe misdirecting a lot of that energy right now, rather than putting it inwards and working on ourselves spiritually, I think is where a lot of this is coming from. But I see it as a very good thing that we're starting to develop the appetite for the awakening that we might be able to achieve. However, much like anything in a family structure, you honor the elders because they have things to teach to you. And as a collective society, what a gift we have of these diaries that our elders have left us, that are these ancient sites with things like, basically almost like computer code in them, with the mathematics that are hard to argue. So let's talk about that. What clues do we have? Are there any, I hear, so the Mormons, for example, okay, I hear about them. I love South Park. They make fun of the Mormons. I was always kind of under the impression that this is kind of a joke religion, but sometimes when I look into them, they're actually using Old Testament, talking about lost tribes of Israel, ending up somewhere else in the world, and they think they might have ended up in North America. So, is there anything that might be left behind, an out of place artifact, or something that might give credit to some weird theories like this? Or what else is there out there that doesn't fit the paradigm that we can start to, follow with our cookie crumbs, so to speak?
Yeah, Brandon, there's so much. It's insane. And it's only like more and more and more every day, with even things like Google Earth, which allows people to just at their own home now leisurely start looking around and see some really weird stuff just on the earth itself. There is a massive treasure trove of breadcrumbs that lead us back to, in my opinion, more questions, so many more questions than answers at this point, but certainly questions that need to be asked. So, I mean, let's go into a whole bunch of them right now. And so for those of you listening, buckle up. There's there's a lot. There's a lot of really amazing out of place artifacts and anomalies. What Brandon just started mentioning too, which is really interesting, is there's actually quite a bit in North America that we don't think about. And the Mormons are really interesting with their pursuit of a previous, with these Hebrews, or with these peoples that came from one continent and came to North America well before we ever accept that would have happened. Well, this isn't the only case. We have accounts also of Vikings visiting here. We also have accounts of the Chinese visiting North America as well. What are these indications? Well, we've got certain stones in the Western states. I forget which state in particular. There are ancient Chinese characters carved into a couple of these stones. No one knows what they even mean. They can't quite translate them, but they're certainly of an Asian and likely ancient Chinese origin. We've got the Kensington Runestone, which no one knows who built that. We've got also in Canada here on the east side on Oak Island, there's these Roman artifacts, Roman sword, Roman coins. This is just off the coast of Canada. Then you've got these Viking artifacts just off the coast of Canada. The way I look at it from the past, one thing to consider before we go into a list of way more interesting, much older artifacts, is that you got to look also, even if we weren't super sophisticated, let's say for the last 5,000-6,000 years or so, we still had boats. We were still a maritime species for a large part of our all the cultures and tribes around the world. And I think we knew how to sail and navigate the waters way better than we give ourselves credit for. I look at the oceans not as dividing walls that, oh, clearly if they were living in North America, they never could have had contact with anyone from Europe, Africa, etc. I don't believe that's true. I think that these were ancient highways. I think that the not even so distant ancients, we're talking just the more primitive ancients of our, last couple thousand years, I think that they still knew how to navigate these waters. There's certain streams that if you literally just let your boat go from a part of Portugal, it'll take you all the way down to certain parts of Brazil, I believe. There's different currents that are very easy to navigate, minus storms and whatnot. But you can get to these different continents in quite primitive boats. And in Egypt, I saw evidence of this. It was really interesting. So there's one, I believe it's in the Valley of the Kings. I forget the name of the temple. I can look it up later. But the important thing is that there's a hieroglyphic depiction on the outside of this temple in Egypt. And it shows a type of bird. And this type of bird is only native to Australia. There's only in Australia can you see this bird. And here we are in Northern Africa, and we see a depiction of this bird. Well, the only way that could happen was either the ancient Egyptians traveled to Australia, or the Australian Aborigines, or whoever else was there, traveled to Egypt. Either way, that's transatlantic travel. That's going on the water to a different continent. So it shows that this world, even in the more recent past, was way more connected than we think. So that's one big thing we got to start to get out of our heads, is this idea that everything was so isolated. All right. But now we're going to jump into some really weird, way out of place artifacts that are just going to make you scratch your head. And these are the things for me that just show that our history we've got 1% at best of what our history is. This story of the human race goes so much further back in time and is so much more sophisticated than we could ever imagine. Okay. And now we'll start with some interesting, not even that crazy, crazy in terms of the date, but the artifact itself. There's just a very basic iron hammer that was found in London, Texas around 1934. And it was encased in stone that had formed around it. So it was basically fossilized. Once they dated this hammer, it dated to over 100 million years old. Okay. So you could go and be as conservative as you want with that dating. Even if it's 1 million years old, that's incredible. 100 million. These are where they start. This is where these start to go into places where, if those of you listening are interested, you can read a book called Forbidden Archaeology by Michael Cremo, and he goes in and he finds peer-reviewed scientific evidence in scientific papers that show all these out-of-place findings of human antiquity and human bones, human footprints, things like that go back literally millions of years and show that we've been around way, way longer. But then I'm going to be listing some artifacts that show not only were we older, but we were also sophisticated way further back. So you've also got this really interesting, we can call it a computer that was found off the coast of Greece, and they call it the Antikythera mechanism, probably butchering the pronunciation of that.
I've heard of this. Yeah, it's a bunch of wheels and stuff encased in stone, eh?
Basically,
I just looked at that hammer, by the way, and it is incredible. It's clearly a hammer, encased in stone. I mean, anyways, for our listeners, Google the London Hammer, Texas. It's nuts.
It's fossilized too. So it's like these dates are easy to date for us. When something gets fossilized, I mean, that's paleontology now. We know how to date that. A lot of the time, structures are hard to date when it's just stone. We still don't know how to date stone yet. But when we have organic matter, that's when we can carbon date. And with fossilized things like this hammer, we can date that because we know how to. So it's actually really, really great that we have that opportunity. But 100 million years is just throws our history book out the freaking window. So with this Antikythera mechanism, this basically it's an ancient computer. It's a series of gears, and they're actually metal gears that were found, yeah, off the coast of Greece, underwater in around the early 1900s. And they did a lot of studies on this thing, and they basically were able to sort of recreate it and came to the conclusion that it was essentially an ancient type of computer. Really, really fascinating. The mechanism itself, like I said, has a series of different gears, and on these gears are these also there are these inscriptions, and they basically talk about different ecliptic and zodiacal signs and different orientations, different astronomical alignments. And that's where we start to know, okay, we're going into ancient times, because as even the most conservative academics and scholars know, the ancients were obsessed with stars and had a very mysteriously in-depth and complex knowledge of astronomy and the stars. So it's interesting that not only is this an ancient computer, but it's got all these classic zodiac and calendar and astrological symbolism and depictions and calculations on them, which is just mind-blowing. So what the heck's an ancient computer doing found that far away? They've tried to date this thing. They think it's around 60 BC, 178 BC, but we don't really know. And even if it's not that old, it's still a computer found before Jesus was born. This is 200 and something BC. Okay. So
yeah, I'm looking at the pictures online right now. It's crazy. And one of them is so interesting. It looks like they've shot it with radar, like ground penetrating radar or LiDAR or something, and that you can see inside of it. And it's just gears within gears within gears within gears. This is if this is not a computer, this is like steampunk industrial revolutionary technology in ancient Greece. Like we're talking, this looks more complex than a grandfather clock coming out of ancient Greece. It's insane.
It's absolutely nuts. And that's the thing, is that it's just these things just make you scratch your head, and we don't know. The cool thing about a lot of this is it's quite humbling. We really don't know much about anything, and I mean that in general, but also with regards to our history, and that's okay. I think it's more important to humble ourselves and just understand that we really have no idea like where we come from and how old we are and how sophisticated we once were in the past. Another really interesting out of place artifact, and I believe, Brandon, you're quite familiar with this one, is the Piri-Reis map. The Piri-Reis map is dated to have been put together in around the 1500s, early, like about 1513 roughly. And the thing is that this map is sourced on much, much earlier maps. Okay. So this map shows, and it's only not a full map, but it shows basically the southern tip of South America. So mostly Brazil. And then it connects to a more southern landmass. And when people have done interesting analysis of this, they conclude that landmass is definitely Antarctica. Well, how in the hell did they know about Antarctica? And they're depicting Antarctica it looks like without any ice on it. So if this is based off of previous earlier maps, the ancients absolutely, one, knew the existence of Antarctica and potentially knew of its existence before it was caked in a layer of ice. So does that mean that there could be an ancient civilization buried under the ice in Antarctica? Maybe. Why is it that the only continent and piece of land on this entire planet that hasn't been claimed by any nation is Antarctica? And after World War II, there's the Antarctica Treaty that was put together forbidding countries from doing this and forbidding military presences on Antarctica. Why would they do that? There's a lot of speculation around that, and I won't even go into it for today.
Well, you know what? No, we're not going to go into it today. Okay. So, we're getting close to our time here. So we're actually going to say goodnight to our lovely content creator, Chris, and the host, Brandon James Sim. We'll be wrapping up this episode as far as an introduction. However, Chris, if you have any time this week, I would love to get into a whole episode starting with Antarctica. There's so many layers to this onion. I have so many questions. So why don't we call this one here tonight and say good night to our listeners, and let's get back together. Let's dive into it. Let's get into Antarctica. Let's get everyone excited because that excites me. And I have so many questions for you, my host. So
yeah, I appreciate that, man. Thanks, Brandon, so much for asking me the questions for the interview today. For those of you guys listening, really appreciate you tuning in for today. We're going to be doing a lot more of this. This is really fun for me because I'm not hosting for a change. Brandon, my good friend, amazing actor, fantastic host and MC, will be doing this in this type of format from now for who knows how long. And so we got lots more to come. But in the meantime, you can always check out the Ancient Mysteries Unearthed YouTube channel. And you can also go to the website, ancientmysteriesunearthed.com, which is essentially a private social media platform. And you can do it, you can trial it for 1 week for free. And then afterwards, if you like it, sign up. It's about $10 a month. And what this is it's a private social media platform of like-minded, curious people like you, me, and anyone else that loves to go down these rabbit holes where we can all connect. You can message each other and we can post and share our research, which is the most important thing. So it's a really fun research hub that I'm going to be building out this year. And of course, from now on onwards, because I want to connect people that are like us, curious, asking the questions, pushing the boundaries. So thank you for listening. Brandon, thank you so much for the interview today. I really appreciate it.
well, to all of our viewers and listeners, we appreciate you. And also, yes, it's just, I nerd out to this stuff. I'm sure our listeners do too. It's just so exciting to get into it. I can't wait to get into more. For all of our listeners, if you just check the links below, you'll find the artifacts discussed and some useful information linking up to some of the discussions tonight. Okay, as well as, of course, a link to Ancient Mysteries Unearthed, the full platform for all you insiders. So thank you, Chris. Let's call her there. Yes, stay curious, everyone, and let's just have some fun discovering beautiful ancient mysteries.
Thanks, everyone.